Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it. Then let's evaluate together. The wind howled outside the towering glass walls of Carter and Brooks Company, a sleek office perched on the 40th floor of a Chicago skyscraper. It was December, and the city sprawled below in a haze of snow and neon lights. Inside, the air was warm but heavy with tension. Mia Carter strode across the polished hardwood floor, her black blazer sharp against the dim glow of the room, her heels clicking like a metronome. She stopped in front of the desk, her desk now, and stared down at the man slumped in the corner. Ethan Brooks looked like a ghost of the guy she'd married. His dark hair was a mess, sticking out in clumps, and his once crisp button-down was wrinkled, stained with what smelled like cheap bourbon. A half-empty bottle dangled from his hand, catching the flicker of the city lights through the window. He didn't look up until she spoke. "Long time no see, Ethan," Mia said, her voice cool and steady. "Call me boss now." He blinked, slow and bleary, like he was waking up from a bad dream. "Mia." His voice cracked, rough from too much booze and not enough sleep. "I messed up. I know I did. Just give me one more shot, please. We can fix this." Mia tilted her head, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. She crossed her arms, letting the silence stretch until it stung. "You had your shots, Ethan. Plenty of them. Now get out before I call security to drag you out." Ethan's hand tightened around the bottle, his knuckles white. "You can't do this," he muttered, desperation creeping in. "This was our company. We built it together." "No," Mia said, stepping closer, her shadow falling over him. "You tore it down. I rebuilt it. And I don't need a washed-up cheater stinking up my office." She turned on her heel, heading for the door. 3 minutes, Ethan. Then you're gone." He scrambled to his feet, the bottle clattering to the floor. "Mia, wait! I'm begging you!" But she didn't stop. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving him alone with the echo of his own voice. 6 months earlier, none of this would have seemed possible. Back then, Mia had been standing in a different kind of spotlight, one she'd dreamed of since she was a kid. It was June 2025, and the grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel glittered like something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting golden light over the white roses and silk tablecloths. The violinist played a soft melody, and the air smelled like champagne and summer blooms. Mia's wedding dress, a custom haute couture piece she'd spent months designing, hugged her frame, the lace shimmering as she moved. She felt like a queen, until she saw them. Ethan stood at the entrance, his tuxedo crisp and his smile wide, greeting guests like the perfect groom. But he wasn't alone. Next to him was Emma Riley, his high school sweetheart, his first love, wearing the exact same dress as Mia. The same intricate lace, the same plunging neckline, the same everything. They looked like a matched set, like they were the bride and groom. Guests whispered, heads turning, and Mia felt the room tilt. She could have screamed. She could have stormed over and ripped that dress off Emma's back, but instead she took a breath, plastered a smile on her face, and walked toward them. The crowd parted, eyes on her, waiting for the explosion. It didn't come. "You two look perfect together," Mia said, her voice smooth as glass. "Like something out of a magazine, picture book couple." Emma's face crumpled. Her big blue eyes welled up, and she bolted from the room, heels clacking on the marble floor. Ethan, though, didn't miss a beat. He spun on Mia, his jaw tight. "God damn it, Mia, why you gotta be so petty? You embarrassed her in front of everyone." Mia's smile didn't waver. "Just calling it like I see it," she said, turning away as the sting of his words sank in. The rest of the night blurred by. Dancing, toasts, fake laughter, but the image of them together burned behind her eyes. By the time the last guest left, Ethan was gone too. He'd taken off for Miami Beach with Emma, leaving Mia to face the empty hotel suite alone. Back in their Gold Coast penthouse, the city hummed outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Mia sat on the leather sofa, the moonlight spilling across the room in pale streaks. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it. Instagram, of course. Emma's latest post stared back at her, Ethan's arms around her on a sunlit beach, waves crashing behind them. The caption read, "Best date ever with my favorite person." Matching rings glinted on their fingers, and their faces were so close their lips nearly touched. Mia's chest tightened, but her face stayed blank. She could have called him, cursed him out, demanded he come home. But what was the point? He'd made his choice. She scrolled through her contacts instead, found the number for her OBGYN, and booked an appointment. Her finger hovered over the screen for a second before she hit confirm. The procedure was set for tomorrow. No tears, no drama, just a quiet decision in the dead of night. She stood, her bare feet silent on the hardwood, and dragged herself to the bedroom. The wedding decor was still up, streamers in soft pinks and golds draped over the walls, a cruel joke now. She didn't bother clearing it away, too tired. She swept the ribbons off the bed with one lazy swipe and collapsed onto the mattress. The weight of the day pressed down on her, heavy and cold, but she didn't fight it. Her phone buzzed again as she plugged it in to charge. Another notification from Emma, because of course, this time it was a story. Ethan lifting her up in a twirl, both of them laughing under palm trees. Mia stared at it for a moment, then powered the phone off. She rolled over, pulling the blanket tight, and let sleep take her. No point in chasing ghosts. The next morning, she woke to silence. No texts from Ethan, no apologies, just more posts from Emma flooding her feed. Kissing in a cafe, shopping on Ocean Drive, grinning like the world was theirs. Mia didn't react, didn't feel the anger she expected or the sadness, just nothing. She grabbed her laptop, emailed her lawyer, and started drafting the divorce papers. 8 years with Ethan, since their reckless courthouse wedding right after college, down the drain. They'd built a life, a company, a brand together, and now it was a mess she'd have to clean up. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The penthouse felt too big, too empty. She could still smell his cologne on the pillows, faint, but there. Her hand rested on her stomach for a second, then dropped. Tomorrow, she'd handle the appointment. After that, she'd handle him. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Mia closed her eyes, a plan forming in the dark. "You'll see, Ethan," she whispered to the empty room. "This isn't over." Imagine your wedding day turning into a total train wreck. Crazy, right? Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. What would you do in Mia's shoes? 2 weeks later, the penthouse was a tomb of silence. Mia sat at the glass dining table, her laptop open to a draft divorce agreement her lawyer had sent over. The screen glowed in the dim room, casting sharp shadows across her face. Outside, the Chicago skyline glittered, oblivious to the wreckage inside her life. She scrolled through the document. Asset division, company shares, the works, her fingers steady on the trackpad. 8 years with Ethan, and it all boiled down to this. The front door clicked open, and she didn't flinch. Ethan stumbled in, his loafers scuffing the hardwood, Emma trailing behind him like a shadow. Their hands were linked, fingers tangled like they didn't care who saw. Mia glanced up, her expression blank, and went back to the screen. Ethan cleared his throat, scratching the back of his neck. Emma's never been to Lake Tahoe, so I took her," he said, his voice too casual, like he was explaining a grocery run. "You're pregnant anyway. Doc said to chill, right?" Mia's eyes flicked to him, then back to the laptop. "Sure, whatever," she said, her tone flat as the table beneath her hands. She didn't look at Emma, didn't acknowledge the way she hovered behind him, all wide eyes and fake innocence. Ethan frowned, shifting his weight. "What's your deal, Mia?" "It's not a big thing." His voice edged up, irritation creeping in. "You're acting like I ran off with her for good." Mia kept typing, the soft clack of keys filling the silence. Emma stepped forward, her voice syrupy sweet. "Don't be mad, Mia. Ethan got you a little something from Tahoe." She nudged him, and he fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. He slid it across the table like it was some grand gesture. Mia paused, glancing at it. She flipped the lid open with one finger, a pair of cheap floral earrings, the kind you'd find at a gas station gift shop. Meanwhile, Emma's wrist sparkled with a diamond bracelet that screamed money, the kind Ethan used to say they couldn't afford. Mia's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Keep it," she said, pushing the box back. "I don't do trinkets." Ethan's face darkened. "You're making a scene over nothing," he snapped, snatching the box up. "What's your problem?" "No problem," Mia said, closing her laptop with a soft snap. "Just busy." She stood, brushing past them toward the kitchen, leaving his question hanging in the air. The next few days were a blur of silence from Ethan and a flood of noise from Emma. Instagram became a torture chamber, photos of them kissing in a dimly lit bar, shopping bags swinging from their arms on Magnificent Mile, laughing over cocktails like they were auditioning for a rom-com. Mia didn't block them, didn't react. She just opened her divorce draft and added the bracelet's estimated cost, $50,000, give or take, to the asset list. Fair was fair. Then came the dinner invite from her parents. Jack and Linda Carter lived in a cozy split level in Evanston, a half-hour drive from the city. Mia pulled up in her Audi, the engine humming as she parked in the driveway. The house smelled like roast chicken and nostalgia, warm, familiar, everything her life wasn't right now. She'd barely stepped inside when Ethan's car rolled up behind hers. He climbed out, hands in his pockets, looking like a kid caught sneaking in late. "Can we walk in together, Mia?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. "Like old times?" She nodded, not meeting his eyes, and headed for the door. Inside, the air turned frosty fast. Jack sat at the head of the table, his gray mustache twitching as he glared at Ethan. "You got some balls showing up here, kid," he said, cutting into his chicken with more force than necessary. Linda, perched beside him, didn't even glance Ethan's way. "Dinner's for family," she said, her voice clipped. "Pass the potatoes, Mia." Ethan squirmed in his seat, fork hovering over his plate. "I just want to talk," he mumbled, but no one answered. The meal dragged on, the clink of silverware the only sound breaking the tension. Mia ate in silence, letting him stew. She wasn't here to play peacemaker. Not anymore. After dinner, Ethan offered to drive her home. She didn't argue, sliding into the passenger seat of his BMW. That's when she saw it, a sticker plastered across the headrest, reserved for Emma, in curly pink letters. She raised an eyebrow and Ethan laughed, too loud. "She's just a kid. You know how she gets," he said, gripping the wheel. "Stuck it there last week. You don't sit here much anyway." "Right," Mia said, her voice dry as the winter air outside. "She's young. That's what girls her age do." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through work emails, ignoring the way he kept glancing at her like he wanted to say more. They were halfway back to the city when her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah Nguyen, her lawyer and old college buddy. "Draft's ready. Meet tomorrow?" Mia typed a quick yes, then froze. Another message popped up, this one from Ethan's number, but it wasn't him. It was Sarah's earlier text, forwarded by mistake. "Ethan's screwed once we file. You sure about this? He'd seen it. The car swerved slightly as Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. "You're sneaking around behind my back?" he growled, eyes flashing. "With who? Some guy from work?" Mia tucked her phone away, meeting his glare with a faint smile. "Takes one to know one," she said, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest. He slammed on the brakes at a red light, the car jerking to a stop. "Don't pull that crap with me, Mia. What's this about?" She didn't answer, just stared out the window at the snow-dusted streets. The light turned green, and he floored it, the engine roaring. They didn't speak again until they pulled up to the penthouse. Mia stepped out, the cold biting at her skin, and headed inside without a backward glance. But the night wasn't over. An hour later, she was at a company event, a swanky fundraiser at a rooftop bar downtown. Ethan showed up, Emma on his arm, both of them dressed to the nines. Mia sipped her wine, watching them work the room, until Emma sidled up to her with that fake sweet smile. "Mia, you're not mad about Tahoe, right?" she said, twirling a strand of hair. "Oh, by the way, your mom seemed real cozy with that guy at the grocery store last week. Hope she's doing okay." Mia's glass stopped halfway to her lips. She set it down, slow and deliberate, and grabbed a napkin from the bar. "Say that again about my mom," she said, her voice low. "And you're done." Before Emma could blink, Mia flung the napkin at her face, leaving a red mark on her cheek. The room went quiet, heads turning. Emma gasped, clutching her face like she'd been shot. Ethan stormed over, eyes blazing. "What the hell, Mia? Apologize to her now or we're through." Mia didn't flinch. She reached into her purse, pulled out the divorce papers she'd printed that morning, and slapped them onto the bar counter. "Oh, we're through all right," she said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Sign it, Ethan. Or don't. Either way, I'm done." He stared at the papers, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Emma whimpered behind him, but Mia didn't care. She turned and walked out, the city lights blurring as she stepped into the night. This was just the beginning. Things just got messy, didn't they? Subscribe now to catch the next twist and tell me in the comments. Team Mia or Team Ethan? The air in Northwestern Memorial Hospital was sterile and cold, sharp with the tang of antiseptic. It was a gray morning in late July 2025, and Mia lay on a stiff gurney in a pale blue gown, staring at the ceiling tiles. The hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, steady and relentless, like the thoughts she couldn't shake. Her parents flanked her, Linda gripping her hand, Jack standing by the door like a sentinel. The appointment was set. No turning back now. Linda's eyes were red-rimmed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You sure about this, honey? It doesn't hurt?" She brushed a strand of hair from Mia's forehead, her fingers trembling. Mia squeezed her hand, managing a small smile. "It doesn't hurt, Mom. They've got anesthesia. I'm okay." She wasn't lying, not about the pain anyway. The rest? She wasn't sure what okay even meant anymore. Jack shifted, his boots scuffing the linoleum. "That bastard better not show his face," he muttered, fists clenched. "Promised he'd be here, didn't he?" Mia didn't answer. She'd texted Ethan the night before, 9 a.m., Women's and Children's Wing. He'd replied with a quick, "I'll be there," but she hadn't held her breath. And sure enough, as the clock ticked past 9, he was nowhere in sight. The nurse wheeled her into the operating room, and the last thing she saw before the anesthesia kicked in was her mom's tear-streaked face. Then it all faded to black. She woke hours later in a recovery room, the world soft and hazy. Linda was there, fussing with the blanket, and Jack sat in a plastic chair, staring out the window at the gray Chicago skyline. Mia's throat was dry. her body heavy, but she felt lighter somehow, like she'd shed something she didn't need anymore. "You're awake," Linda said, her voice cracking with relief. "How you feeling, baby?" "Fine," Mia croaked, sitting up slowly. "It's done." She didn't elaborate, didn't need to. Her parents exchanged a look, worry, anger, something unspoken, but they didn't push. That afternoon she was cleared to walk the halls, a slow shuffle in her hospital slippers. Linda had gone to grab coffee, Jack to refill a water jug. Mia was alone, leaning against the wall for balance, when she heard his voice. "Mia?" Ethan rounded the corner, his face pale, eyes wide. Emma clung to his arm, her makeup smudged like she'd been crying. "I didn't know you were here. Emma, she had a scare, a progesterone thing. I had to—" Mia cut him off with a look, sharp enough to slice through his excuses. "Save it," she said, turning to walk away. But he grabbed her wrist, his grip tight. "I'm the father," he said, his voice rising. "I've got rights, Mia. What's going on with my kid? Tell me." She yanked her arm free, spinning to face him. Her hand flew before she could stop it, a slap that echoed down the hall. "You think you deserve to be a dad?" she hissed, her calm cracking for the first time in weeks. "You don't even deserve to be in this building." Ethan stumbled back, clutching his cheek. Emma gasped, sinking to the floor in a dramatic heap. "Ethan," she whimpered, reaching for him. But before he could move, Jack stormed up, water jug forgotten, and landed a punch square on Ethan's jaw. "The kid's gone, you bastard!" Jack roared, his voice shaking the walls. "You want custody? Dig through the trash for it." Ethan froze, his hand dropping. "Gone?" he whispered, staring at Mia. "What do you mean, gone?" She didn't answer, just turned and walked back to her room, Jack's arm steadying her. The hall buzzed with whispers, nurses, patients, all watching the mess unfold. She didn't care. Let them stare. Later that evening, she was propped up in bed, picking at a tray of Jell-O, when the door creaked open again. Ethan stepped in, alone this time, his shoulders slumped. Behind him came Robert and Diane Brooks, his parents, their faces tight with guilt. Robert spoke first, his voice gruff. "Mia, we heard what happened. It's all Ethan's fault. We're sorry you've been dragged through this." Diane nodded, her pearls glinting under the hospital lights. "He knows he screwed up, hon. Can't you give him one more chance? For the family?" Mia set the Jell-O down, folding her hands in her lap. "One more chance," she repeated, her tone flat. She reached into her bag, pulled out a new set of divorce papers, harsher than the last, and slid them across the tray. "Sign this, Ethan. You walk away with nothing. No company, no money, no me." Ethan's eyes widened, but Diane stepped forward, her voice pleading. "Mia, think about it. We'll make it right. Property, shares, anything you want if he messes up again. Just don't end it like this." Mia leaned back, studying them. "Fine," she said after a long pause. "Sign it, Ethan. Then we'll see." He hesitated, pen trembling in his hand, but the weight of his parents' stares pushed him over. He scrawled his name across the line, then looked up, eyes desperate. "Forgive me now?" he asked, voice breaking. "Sure," Mia said, her smile cold as the room. "I forgive you." She took the papers back, tucking them away. Ethan exhaled, relief washing over him, too soon. The next day, she was discharged. Her parents drove her home, the city a blur of steel and concrete outside the car window. She scrolled through her phone, ignoring the missed calls from Ethan until a notification caught her eye. A text from Sarah. "You're a badass, Mia. Papers are filed. What's next?" Mia smirked, typing a reply. Watch me. Then she opened her messages, found Emma's number, and sent a calculated jab. Guess you weren't that special. Ethan's coming with me tomorrow. Said you were just a fling. Her phone buzzed almost instantly. Emma's response was a wall of text, defensive and furious. You're lying. He'd never say that. I'll show you. Mia didn't reply. She didn't need to. Hours later, her gamble paid off. Paparazzi photos hit Twitter. Ethan and Emma locked in a sloppy kiss outside her Wicker Park apartment. The hashtag #EthanTheCheat exploded, trending nationwide. Mia leaned back on her couch, the penthouse dark except for the glow of her screen. Carter and Brooks Company stock plummeted as the scandal spread, but she wasn't worried. She'd already sold her shares to Tom Hayes, a rival exec who'd been circling the company like a shark. Let him deal with the fallout. She'd buy it back later, cheap, once Ethan crashed and burned. She poured herself a glass of wine, the red liquid catching the city lights. Checkmate, she whispered, raising the glass to no one. Her phone buzzed again. Sarah. You're a genius, Mia. But are you sure about this? Mia sipped, then typed back. I've never been surer. Outside, the Chicago River glittered, cold and unyielding, just like her. Ethan thought he'd won her forgiveness. Emma thought she'd won him. They were both wrong. Mia just turned the tables. Wild, right? Subscribe to see how it all ends, and drop a comment. Would you play the long game like Mia? The Drake Hotel glowed under a blanket of December snow, its grand ballroom packed with Chicago's elite. It was the Carter and Brooks Cumperl annual gala, 6 months after the wedding that had started this whole mess. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting a warm golden hue over the crowd, suits and sequins, champagne flutes clinking, laughter rising like smoke. Mia stood at the edge of the stage, her black gown hugging her frame, a stark contrast to the white lace she'd worn here last time. She wasn't the bride tonight. She was the queen. The MC handed her the mic, and the room hushed. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice steady, cutting through the murmur. It's been a hell of a year, but we're stronger now, because I made us that way. Applause erupted, loud and genuine, and she let it wash over her. She'd rebuilt the company from the ashes Ethan left behind, and tonight was her victory lap. Then she saw him. Outside the tall windows, Ethan stood in the snow, a tattered coat flapping around him. His face was gaunt, eyes hollow, a far cry from the charming groom he'd been. He pressed a hand to the glass, staring at her like a lost dog. The crowd noticed, too. Whispers rippled through the room, fingers pointing. Mia didn't miss a beat. "Security," she said into the mic, her tone calm but firm. "Get him out." 2 guards moved fast, dragging Ethan back as he shouted, his voice muffled by the glass. "Mia, I'm sorry. Please." She turned away, finishing her speech with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Enjoy the night, everyone. We've earned it." The party roared back to life, but Mia's mind was already elsewhere. She'd seen the photos, Ethan kissing Emma outside her apartment, the scandal that tanked the company. She'd played her hand perfectly, selling her shares to Tom Hayes before the crash, then swooping in to buy it back at a fraction of the cost when Ethan's mismanagement drove it into the ground. The board had begged her to take the helm. Now it was hers, every brick, every dollar. A week later, she was in Santa Fe, New Mexico, a place she'd once dreamed of visiting with Ethan. The air was crisp, scented with piñon smoke from the adobe fireplace in her rented casita. She sat on the porch, a mug of coffee warming her hands, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains looming in the distance. No penthouse, no city noise, just her and the quiet. She'd spent 2 months exploring, hiking red rock trails, tasting green Chile stew, losing herself in the art galleries. It was better than any honeymoon she'd imagined. Her phone buzzed, breaking the stillness. A text from Sarah. "Company's killing it. Stock's up 20%. Ethan's parents just lost their jobs, too. Media dug up some old dirt. You okay?" Mia sipped her coffee, the steam curling in the cold air, and typed back, "Never better." She meant it. Ethan was a ghost now. Rumors said he'd holed up in a cheap apartment in Pilsen, barely leaving, his phone off the grid after the internet tore him apart. Emma hadn't fared much better. Mia had sued her for the cost of that diamond bracelet, draining her savings. The last she'd heard, Emma was waitressing at a dive bar in Milwaukee, her Instagram silent. Mia didn't gloat. She didn't need to. They'd dug their own graves. Back in Chicago, the gala had been the final nail. She'd released a stash of old texts and videos from Emma, taunting messages, clips of her bragging about stealing Ethan. The internet exploded again, Emma the homewrecker trending alongside Ethan the cheat. Emma the homewrecker. Public outrage had fueled the company's comeback. People loved a redemption story, and Mia gave them one. Profits soared, her net worth climbing into the stratosphere. She'd returned to the city just before the holidays, stepping back into the CEO's office like she'd never left. That's when Ethan showed up, unshaven, reeking of desperation, begging for a job, a chance, anything. She'd stood behind her desk, the skyline framing her like a crown, and said, "You don't belong here anymore." He'd crumpled, tears streaking his face, but she'd already moved on. Tonight, as the gala wound down, she slipped out early. The snow fell in thick flakes, blanketing Michigan Avenue in white. She waved off the driver, opting to take her car, a sleek Tesla she'd bought herself. The engine hummed as she pulled onto Lakeshore Drive, the city lights fading in her rearview. Ethan's last plea echoed in her head. "We built this together," and her own reply, "You tore it down. I rebuilt it." She turned up the radio, some old Springsteen song about freedom and open roads, and let it carry her south. The lake stretched dark and endless to her left, the road ahead winding through the night. She didn't need him, didn't need anyone. For the first time in years, she felt whole. Back at the Drake, the guards had called Ethan's parents to pick him up. Robert and Diane had arrived, their faces etched with shame, bundling him into their car like a child. He'd looked back at the hotel, at the life he'd lost, and muttered, "I didn't mean for this." But no one listened. Mia kept driving, the snow swirling around her. She thought about the past, those early days with Ethan at the University of Illinois, sneaking beers in the dorm, dreaming up their company over late-night pizza. They'd marketed their love story, turned it into a brand, and he'd thrown it away for what? A fling that didn't last? She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. His love had been cheap. Hers wasn't. The road stretched on, and she let it take her. Santa Fe had taught her something. She could build a life alone, and it could be damn good. The company was hers now, the scandal a distant memory. She'd won, not just against Ethan, but for herself. Her phone buzzed again as she hit the outskirts of the city. Another text from Sarah. "You're a legend, Mia. Drinks when you're back." Mia smiled, the first real one in months, and typed, "You're on." She tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, the sticker long gone, and cranked the music louder. The night was hers, and so was everything else. That's Mia's story. Epic, right? Subscribe for more crazy tales like this and let me know in the comments. What's your takeaway from Mia's journey?